This week's episode of the ArtTactic Podcast is brought to you by ArtTactic.com, where you can now check out our latest report, the Middle East North African Auction Market 2015-2024 report, drawing on 10 years of auction data across key regional and international houses. The Middle East North African Auction Market Report traces the market developments over the past 10 years, and you can get a 15% discount on this report and all reports by being a loyal podcast listener by using the promo code PODCAST15 at checkout. Thanks for listening to the ArtTactic Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Green. If you haven't been to Storm King, I highly recommend it. It spans over 500 acres, and it's one of the few museums in the art world that's dedicated almost entirely to outdoor sculpture. It's located about an hour outside of New York City. It's really an all-day experience, walking the grounds and encountering some truly monumental works of art. The museum recently completed a $53 million capital project, and it's set to reopen on May 7th. So we thought it was the perfect time to have Nora Lawrence, the executive director of Storm King, join the podcast. We talk with Nora about what's new at Storm King, what it's like to manage an outdoor museum, and we get her insights on current trends in sculpture. We hope you enjoy the conversation. Thanks so much for listening. Nora, thanks so much for joining us.
Of course. Thanks for having me. Hi.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you on ahead of your reopening next month on Wednesday, May 7th, after completing a $53 million capital project. I think a great place to start would be if you could walk us through just how that money was used and how these changes will transform the visitor experience at Storm King.
Yeah, definitely. So let me tell you a little bit first, just so everyone has the same background, what we are, who we are. We are a 500-acre outdoor museum and sculpture park about an hour north of New York City, an hour north of the George Washington Bridge in New York State in the Hudson Valley. And we were founded in 1960. And since then, we have expanded. We were actually built on the site that had formerly been mined. There was gravel and stone under our site that was used to create the New York State Thruway in 1955. So we were actually a major land reclamation project. It had been different family farmlands, but it had been really decimated by this construction and thruway building. So to put it back together over several years was a 45-year-long project for one single landscape architect, Bill Rutherford Sr., who had worked with Storm King to make us what we are. What hadn't really happened over all of the years since 1960, since Storm King was founded, was we had never really had any purpose-built structures for our site and for our needs. So we have different buildings on site that we use for different things. We have a beautiful mansion that's used both for some offices, but also for our museum building. So we have museum exhibitions going on in there. And then other than that, for instance, our sculpture, fabrication, and conservation, which we need to do a lot of because we're best known for these large-scale outdoor sculptures that we have across our property, very large scale, the tallest one being 99 feet tall by Mark de Subero. We have always needed space to kind of conserve them, to paint them, different things like that. But it had never been something that we'd made the effort to do in a real thoughtful way, with the end result being kind of what that building would be built for. So we were working in kind of an old barn, an old, just old studio sheds kind of. So we'd never really had the facilities to match the ambition of what we were doing. So that's on one hand. So we have a new building called the David R. Collins Building for Conservation, Fabrication, and Maintenance. That's a beautiful, purpose-built not offsite, but outside of public view building where we can really work with artists and kind of make their dreams come true in the way that we want to at Storm King. And then we also have revised our we revised our entry sequence. So what used to happen when people came to Storm King is they would drive in, they would pay at a booth while they're still in their cars, and then they would drive into the very center of our property to park in one of three different parking lots. So there are a lot of issues that were arising from that. We've had a tremendous amount of growth since about 2010, where our attendance has really grown fourfold. So to have all of those people in their cars on our site, where really we're trying to create a pedestrian place for people to walk, for people to enjoy. We rent bikes to people, and we really want it to be that kind of more leisurely experience on site and something that's not interrupted by cars. We also were interested in being able to welcome everyone who comes through Storm King's doors in the same way. Orient people, tell them where they are, tell them a little bit about ourselves, and let them kind of have an experience with the information that we're able to give them at the front, which now we can do. So we were able to build a parking lot just outside the main gate of what used to be the gate to Storm King, which was land that we owned. So now everyone parks in the same place, and we've built this gorgeous outdoor lobby or welcome pavilion where everyone can come in, get their tickets in the same place. We have a group canopy where people coming in school groups or other types of groups can gather. We have, I know this sounds like not a big deal, but we have a gorgeous new pavilion for bathrooms, for a nursing room, for different facilities that people need as they're arriving. And then we also have the opportunity to really gracefully welcome people into our site. So now when people arrive at Storm King, they walk in after getting their tickets and kind of getting their bearings of where they are and what we are. They walk in together on this beautiful path that opens up onto the view of a 42-foot tall Alexander Calder sculpture called the Arch, which has been part of our collection since 1978 and really kind of is this marker of who we are and what we do best. So you're really arriving and right away understanding Storm King in a way that involves art as well as nature, because this sculpture is within beautiful native grasses that are very tall around it, and you're kind of entering and really getting this right away. So those are the tenets of what we did. The other thing that we were able to do through this is really improve the visitor experience and the landscape on our site. So for one thing, we planted 650 new trees. We introduced a number of native species back to the habitat that they have at Storm King. And we also were able to take those old parking lots and bring them back into natural spaces. So we have a new, beautiful new field called Tippett's Field, which is formerly our south parking lot. And so it's a very big space that's now really, really a central spot at Storm King. And we've put on view there for this year, for this opening year, a brand new project by Kevin Baisley. And then we also have a new area called our North Meadow, which used to be a parking lot as well, and now is a daylit stream. There had been a stream running underneath this parking lot, and we've been able to kind of bring that back to its natural habitat and also create this beautiful bridge over it to our cafe. So it's really, everything we've done has been with the visitor experience in mind, with the artists that we work with in mind, and really making everything a bit of a more graceful experience for people coming to Storm King and for artists working at Storm King.
Well, it sounds really incredible, and I can't wait to return to Storm King to see it all. So the museum, it has one of the most iconic permanent collections of outdoor sculptures in the world, and it features many major 20th century artists. Of course, sculpture is a bit more permanent, or at least more difficult to move around. It isn't like paintings where you can just take one right off the wall. So I'm curious, how do you think about balancing, preserving, and highlighting those historical works while also creating space to showcase contemporary voices in sculpture?
What I love about Storm King is there's often an opportunity to visually make these connections between the past artists of the 20th century and those artists who have moved into the 21st century with us and are creating incredible, dynamic, large-scale outdoor sculptures that kind of are bringing us into the future. we had an exhibition last year with the artist Arlene Sheckett, who created 6 new outdoor sculptures with Storm King as their first venue in mind. And Arlene was really thinking about the history of outdoor sculpture as well as the history of constructivist sculpture. So when you think of constructivist sculpture, many people go back to Picasso's guitar, but this idea of creating sculpture by putting together disparate elements to make something, right? So think about welding or soldering or putting together different pieces of metal. And that was something that Arlene was really taken with when she came to Storm King and saw different works by the likes of David Smith, who was somebody who was always putting together pieces of metal, scraps of metal, old cars. We have one sculpture by David Smith called Personage of May that is now cast in bronze, but he made it by connecting the head of a shovel to the bumper of a truck, right? And he was able to do that by welding these pieces together and making them something new. So what really attracted Arlene to this opportunity was it was a way to move her work into this very large scale outdoor arena, which she's always been really interested in, and also a way to kind of pay homage to these sculptors coming before her and work in a similar technique to them, but really adding a lot of other types of means of working as well. So for instance, she's working with colors that did not exist in outdoor form or for outdoor use at the time when David Smith was making work. They're also pretty outrageous colors for outdoor sculpture today, generally speaking. So thinking about the old and new is something that I think you can really do at Storm King. And without kind of the walls of a traditional gallery, there's both on our 500 acres enough space for artists to kind of really have their works breathe with us and find spaces of themselves. But there are also so many opportunities to make these connections sort of backwards and forwards in time between the likes of someone like David Smith or Alexander Calder, who I've brought up, and other artists who we've worked with much more recently, like Maya Lin, who has a gorgeous 11-acre site-specific work at Storm King called Wavefield, or Alice Aycock, who has some incredible work with us. One piece which is site-specific and one is not, is a kind of a large-scale sculpture. So really thinking back and forth about what we can offer artists, and our history being one of those things.
And I'm sure you're very focused on looking at many sculptures on a daily basis, both historical examples and new ones. So I'm curious, from your vantage point, what are some of the current aesthetic or conceptual trends you're seeing that you find interesting when it comes to outdoor sculptures, and particularly large-scale examples? Have there been any recent shifts in the way artists are approaching it?
That's so interesting. So I'm going to answer this by speaking about a work we commissioned from the artist Martin Purrier that opened in 2023, which is called Lookout. And Martin worked in so many different ways. The work, when you see it, you would think this work is made from brick, and it is. It's this beautiful large scale. It's about 22 feet tall, and it basically it creates a pavilion that people can stand within. That's all crafted out of bricks. So it's kind of a dome. A dome at the top, but then also at the front, it's an arch. So if you can imagine an arch kind of moving up and becoming a dome, that shows you the shifts in the bricks that he was working with. But then underneath that, there's also this rebar framework, and he made that with a fabricator local to our area named Casey Fabrications, and he was really working in a way that really took the most contemporary and best of our knowledge in terms of working with computers, working with physics, working with architecture, and working with, CAD and different people who work with computer generated things and then move them over to the handmade. So the interior of it is built in this incredibly engineered way, but the exterior seems to be something that's completely clad in brick. So one of the most traditional materials that we know. Similarly, Arlene Sheckett, in the work that I was talking about, was working back and forth between the manual, the physical, the analog with her hands, with other people helping her to weld, and then back and forth between digital imagery. So she would be using the digital to be able to kind of find what she wanted and then put it back into the next iteration of these sculptures as they became bigger and bigger through different models. And I think that's often true. I mean, Sonia Gomez, we have an exhibition opening with this year, and she made her first outdoor work with us. She had made one outdoor sculpture early in her career that just stayed in her studio. So this is going to be the first outdoor work that's brought to audiences. And this is also going to be her first exhibition, her first solo exhibition at a museum in the United States. She's a 74-year-old Brazilian artist who we're working with, and we're really excited about this. And working both, again, in the analog and the digital, she created this 13-piece pendulum work for a beautiful big tree on site. So she has these works done in traditional kind of tapestries woven together, lots of kind of handcrafted materials and pieces that she's adhered to each other, but then also to place it in the tree or figure out exactly how she wanted to use it. She was using more traditional architectural methods like CAD and other sort of computer technologies. So I would say, rather than answering something more simple like, oh, everyone's doing 3D printing now, or everyone's doing this, or everyone's doing that, I think people are really thinking of it both ways, right? And remembering just the best of everything they can do. We had an exhibition with Wageshi Mutu in 2022, and she was both working at a foundry and working in kind of traditional ways to really craft and fabricate her work, but then also taking different pieces that she'd get from kind of more of a technological way of making things, and then incorporating that into her process as well. So I think this real back and forth between those things, and I think that's also kind of thinking about the best of sculpture, right? Is using everything at an artist's disposal, finding creativity and discovery in every method, and then putting those things together in ways that really bring new results to the fore and help artists produce what they're looking for.
And so, of course, Storm King, it's almost entirely outdoors. So you run a museum that's almost exclusively outside, and that's very unique for the art world, of course. And I'm sure it comes with certain challenges, whether it's logistical, environmental, or even curatorial. What are some of the pressing issues that you face at Storm King that maybe a traditional museum, an indoor museum, wouldn't necessarily encounter as regularly?
As with so many things, I think some of our biggest challenges are also our greatest assets. Site specificity at Storm King being one of them. We work with artists, particularly on permanent commissions when we do those, but also on our temporary projects. We always work with artists to find the right places to display their work for various reasons. So actually thinking about our temporary show this year with Kevin Beasley on this new field called Tibbetts Field at the center of our site, we were able to work with him to really site the sculpture exactly in our view shed. So you have kind of Storm King Mountain coming down in the back of it on one side, Scunnamunk Mountain coming down in the back of it on the other side. And so it was amazing to site it there. But of course, particularly on a new piece of land, Kevin had to really trust us and believe us that this parking lot, which is how he saw it first, was going to be transformed and was transformable into something as beautiful as the field that it now is and is about ready to open on May 7th. So I think one thing that can be really challenging is we have to have this sense with artists of this real trust us, this will be great, because we're often showing to artists things that are a non-site. Right? When they come and see where we want their work to be, there's obviously not another work already there because we wouldn't be offering it to them. So habitually we'll say things like, okay, this is going to transform because we can cut the grass in this way, or we can make this higher ground than it was. For instance, with our commission that we did a long time ago with Isamu Noguchi, we basically built a hill for that piece, or for the commission that we made with Sarah Z in 2021 called Fallen Sky, we were able to bring in about 7 feet of fill, soil and gravel to basically make a meadow in front of it in a place where there'd been a much steeper hill. So kind of going back to our roots of this environmental reclamation and creating a landscape is something that is often within what we do at Storm King, but also is something that we give back to the artists and kind of make work for their projects. One other thing I would say, I think, is always a challenge that was something that was really new to me when I started working as in-depth with outdoor work as I do now. I had been a more traditional curator before coming to Storm King. I had worked at MoMA, I had worked at the National Gallery, and the idea of outdoor sculpture conservation was really new to me. And the way in which it's very habitual to repaint an outdoor sculpture was something that was totally new and frankly kind of outrageous to me coming into this field, because when you are working with, a plaster sculpture by ARP, or you're working with, again, Picasso's guitar, you're never thinking in those terms. You're never thinking, let me go in and recoat the surface with paint. But outdoors, it's absolutely critical. You have to, if a sculpture is painted and underneath it is steel, you need to always keep the coating of paint absolutely pristine and perfect to avoid rust, to avoid further chipping, anything like that. So one thing actually we have brought to our new fabrication building is a 50-foot long paint booth. So you can actually back a whole flatbed truck up into this paint booth. That's how large it is, and spray a sculpture just, in situ as you need to. So that's something that I feel very, very relieved and happy to have as part of this capital project, is this new opportunity. Because before we would still need to paint these sculptures, but either you might be doing them outside and a bug gets in the surface, or, the wind changes it, or it starts raining and it's just not the right conditions anymore. Or in other cases, we were sending things really to other parts of the country to get what we needed in terms of these very specific and perfected paint coats.
And before we let you go, I wanted to ask you about outdoor sculpture in the context of private collections. We have a lot of collectors who listen to the podcast, and in my experience as an art advisor, and even in conversations with collectors and galleries, relatively few collectors actually take the leap and collect outdoor sculpture, even if they have the outdoor space. I always encourage it, because I think outdoor sculpture, it brings a unique kind of magic to a collection. It lets the collection live beyond the walls of the home and really opens up opportunities to collect artists who thrive in that format. From your perspective, what would you say to collectors who may be a little bit hesitant about acquiring outdoor sculpture? And what can you say to give them that extra push or bit of confidence to begin that journey?
One thing I would say is that it is incredible to work with spend time with a work of art that is constantly changing. And that's something that outdoor sculpture just absolutely is doing. Things at Storm King never look the same. Right now, the leaves are just starting to come out. They're going to be in full, greenery very soon. Then come September, October, they're going to be orange, they're going to be yellow, they're going to be red. And it changes what the sculpture looks like. And that's something that I've heard again and again from artists. And so maybe that's one pitch for collectors, is the extent to which you can learn about a work of art by seeing it in so many different conditions. You see it at dusk, you see it in the sunrise, but also the give back to artists that provides when they also get to see it in that way. Because I've heard time and again from artists that the fact that we have our exhibitions on from May until November is such a difference for them, because they get to see their sculpture at all of these different times of day and at all these different times of the year, which is, I think, pretty amazing. So I would say that's one thing, just really living with something and really getting these different ways in which it exists beyond just always having the same type of light on it, always being in the same type of space. So that's, I think, really exciting. And then also, I would say, really thinking about and having a plan for the future of a work is something that's really important for collectors to be thinking about, because it is really getting into something that's probably more permanent or semi-permanent than a lot of the things that might go up in the walls of a house. But maybe thinking about it as a real opportunity to work with an artist and bring to them something that usually they can't produce or they can't do. And that I think is one real joy of working with outdoor art and working with the sculptors that I get to talk to in my day, is just really learning how we've brought their work into a different plane and kind of shown them a turning point that they didn't know would be there for them.
I think that was a great answer, and I hope we push some people to begin their outdoor sculpture collecting journey. Nora, thank you so much again for joining us on the podcast and sharing your insights. It's such an exciting moment for Storm King, and we're all looking forward to seeing how the newly transformed space will shape the experience for visitors and artists alike. If our listeners want to follow along regarding Storm King's upcoming programming or learning more information, what's the website? Where can we follow you on social media?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a big following on Storm King Arts Center on Instagram. We also have our website, stormking.org. I'm on Instagram, but probably not as frequently as I should be. And I'm Nora Lawrence. And yeah, we'd love to keep talking to people who are interested. Come to our events. We have a upcoming dance performance with dance and music performance with Kevin Beasley during Upstate Art Weekend, which is July 20th and 21st. And we'll see everyone this summer at Storm King.
Absolutely. Looking forward to seeing you out there. Thanks so much again, Nora.
Thank you so much.